Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Tamras, and welcome to the first steps for new applicants. We have 3 people today that will be running this workshop with me. Myself, as well as Yitz Motzen, and Orly Tamir will be doing the Q&As. Now, just so you know, you will be able to answer the questions in the Q&A section. Please do not put your questions in the chat, but only in the Q&A. Thank you very much. So I want to tell you that this is an overview of things you will need to consider as you move along on your road to Aliyah. More specifics can be found on our website and, of course, with your Aliyah advisor. Our website is very user-friendly, but you're also able to put into Google NBN and education, NBN and communities, NBN, and whatever you're trying to find. It's pretty easy to use, and hopefully you can find many answers on there of the questions that we might not be able to answer today. Because again, as I said, this is only an interview. Okay, so let's get started on next screen. Okay, so first of all, mazel tov on taking this first major step in making your Aliyah dreams a reality. Okay, this is not an easy process. But it can be very fun, and hopefully with the assistance of your Aliyah advisor, you'll be able to get through everything together. And to keep in mind, it's never really too early to start your application, as there are only really 2 items that expire, and we'll go into those later on in the presentation. I applaud you for starting now, and it's something that you want to keep in mind that no matter what you put into the application, that will stay there. So if your timeline changes, that's okay too. So keep that in mind, okay? Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so today we're going to cover the planning and process of making Aliyah. I'm gonna cover the planning part, and we're just gonna highlight the areas that you should be considering and thinking about. And more specifics can be found on our website and also should be discussed with your Aliyah advisor. So the first one we're going to go into, we're going to do very briefly, and that's about community. Now, one of the things that's very important is most people already know what community they're looking at, or at least the area. However, there are some that are not sure and are still trying to figure this out. Coincidentally, we have a webinar right after this on communities that will start, I think, about 8 o'clock on Israel time. And Orly's going to post that sign up so that you can do that right after this, because that's going to go into more details on communities than what we're able to go through right now here for you. Now, with that said, hopefully you'll be able to we'll try to stop a few minutes early so that you'll have an opportunity to be able to sign up. Okay, let's go into employment. So you have to think about, what do I do? What can you do? If you have a profession that you feel is easily transportable, that's great. Or being that the one good thing that came out of COVID was that many people can work remotely, that's another way to think about what you can do here. However, taking all that into consideration, you want to look at your skills. You want to see what your skill set is. You want to get that down into, probably a new resume. Like for myself, I was in a career in the States for like 25 years, and I hadn't had to do a resume for a very long time. So when it came down to finding a job here, I had to rethink, like, what are all the skills that I've taken in from my current job that I might be able to transport somewhere else. Now, again, if you have a job that you can do remotely, that's wonderful. And if you have something that I also recommend thinking about, if you have a job now that is not remote, but you've been thinking of, and you're still like maybe a year out, and maybe you might be able to get a job that could be remote, it might be a good way to start off here. But with all that said, a lot of people come here without a job to begin with, because it's not really something in Israel. It's not like you can usually get a job 6 months in advance of you coming, or even 2 months in advance. I mean, some companies will work with you on that, but for the most part, they want you here. And the thing is, they can't really do contracts and things that when you're overseas, you need to be in Israel and be starting your job then. So no, go back, please. Sorry about that. All right. So again, your skill set is very important. You want to do some research. You want to update your LinkedIn profile. You want to do some online employment workshops that we have. And of course, we have a website, an email, employment@nbn.org.il, that can really assist you in, they're not going to find you a job, but they certainly can help you look over your resume, help give you some pointers, as well as we do have job boards that can be referred to. As far as if you're a professional and you have a license, you should definitely keep that in mind and make sure you bring the originals of that. And for degree recognition, you might need to provide transcripts. So please be sure that you have those on hand as well. Bring all the originals here, just like all the other documents that you have to bring. These are originals and should be considered. Okay. All right. So let's move on to education.
I had one little tiny thing, just be aware in terms of licensing. We have a MEDEX for anyone who's in the medical professional. It's coming up in March. It was huge last year, and this year is turning out to look like it's going to be even bigger. So if you're in any kind of medical profession, you should Google MEDEX NBN. We have a huge event in March.
Thank you. Yes, that was great. I appreciate that. Okay, education. So the education system here for higher education is a bit different from the States. It is basically most bachelor's degrees are only 3-year programs. Because the programs here are usually fit to what you're looking for specifically. So they kind of cut out that first year of odd and end programs or courses. And what you're looking for in Israel, it may or may not be in English. So that is something you want to keep in mind when you're trying to find the right program and how to apply and English-speaking programs. All of that, we have a specialist that does education. Her name is Shlomit, and her email address is here. But you definitely want to consider, it's definitely something you should review the website under higher education to see exactly the different programs. I mean, we have very high-class universities here, and there's even a program that's called IDC, which is mostly in English. So there are definitely different places you can go and that can help you get your higher education, whether it's your bachelor's or your master's. So keep that in mind, and that would be that'd be great. Okay, I hope we're not going too fast, but at the same time, we want to be able to cover everything that we need. So again, like I said, this is kind of an overview. So healthcare. Now, how do you choose an HMO? It's basically like an HMO for people that maybe live in California. You might be a little bit more familiar with that. But here it's there's basically 4. There's, as you see on your screen, there's Me'ochedet, Klalit, Maccabi, and Leumit. Now, depending on where you're going to live, could depend on which ones you can choose. If you're living in the center where a lot of people move to, as far as Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, then you probably are not going to really make a wrong choice because they're all available there. If you're moving to the periphery, somewhere on the outlying areas, you might only have 1 or 2 of these available to you. So that is something to look into as well when you're looking at places to live. Now, when you're talking about when you're talking about specialists and things, if you have something that is chronic, you should definitely speak to your own doctor to see if they maybe have a doctor here that they're aware of. And then you can find out what kupa, which is what these are called, which one that they belong to. And that could make it a little bit easier on something, especially that might be more chronic. So again, research and resources, you got to do your research. I always tell people speak to friends and family that are living in the area that you're thinking about and ask them who they have. And of course, people with children, with young children, you know, pediatricians are very important, obviously. And again, speaking to your friends and family that are in the area, it would be a very good resource to check out on that. Cultural adaptation is basically, like we said before, it has to do with, you know, you're not, you know, in the States, I mean, first of all, health insurance here is a lot cheaper. So that's a good thing to start off with. But you're not, you know, specialists or have to do with, you get referrals from your main doctor usually. Not all specialists do you need to do that through. So those are things that will need to be considered. There are also different levels of healthcare, but when you land and you get here, you'll get the basic, and then once you meet with your age, once you meet with your Kupat Cholim, you'll be able to decide which level of insurance that you want. Another great resource is Kol Zchut. They have resources on rights and entitlements. It's very, very user-friendly, and it's in English. And the Shira Pransky project was a resource that is now run by Yad Le'olim. But if you just put in to Google the Shira Pransky project, you will go directly to the site that helps you with different health things. Now that site is probably more for people that, you know, have different medical situations that they really want to address. And that would be important to be able to have some more help and assistance with that. It also, on our website under healthcare, you can actually look at the basket of meds, the prescriptions that you take, and see if that's available. They're also, you know, obviously a lot of them have different names depending. So you might want to look at that and make sure those are available to you. Okay. Okay, great. All right. Now for finances. So this is a big thing, especially in today's environment. You know, the cost of living here is not cheap. It's fairly high, but that also goes by depending on where you live now. If you know, live in the like New York City area, or you live in LA, you might find that the cost of living here is not that much different. It might even be maybe less, but definitely probably equal to what you're used to now. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And, you know, to start to think about, you're also going to be living in smaller spaces. There's a lot of things that are going to be different in terms of your budget, in terms of, am I going to have a car? A lot of people don't have cars in the major cities. If you don't have a car, you don't have insurance, those types of things. As you know, gas prices here are, even though we're closer to where they get the oil, for some reason, it's still much more expensive. So please keep that in mind. So some of the things you want to do is you want to make a budget. Again, remembering that health costs are going to be significantly cheaper. Schooling, if your kids go to day school, you're going to find that is also going to be significantly cheaper. So that can help with your budget and cost of living. In terms of finances also, what are your employment opportunities? What is the job market? What do they pay in those types of fields? You want to consider those things. Your taxes and your pay slip, it's very important. We advise everybody to speak to a tax advisor that is familiar with Israeli and American taxes. Now, with that in mind, you know, the thing that's very, very important is that if you're working remotely or for an American company here, you definitely want to have someone that's really on top of that. Because there's some ins and outs there that you're going to want to consider and that you're going to need to know about. And the best way to get that is through your tax advisor. Now, that's not something we refer you to, as far as we can't refer you to a specific person. But again, if you have friends or family that live here already and they're from the States or from Canada, they probably have somebody in mind that they have used also. So that's a very good resource for you. I mean, I know I keep repeating that friends and family are very important. And if you don't have that, please talk with your Aliyah advisor and we'll try to get you to the right place, okay? Okay, as far as your benefits, what's included in your saklita, which is called your basket of benefits, including the money you get from the government for the first 6 months. Please, we really urge you, do not include that in your budget. Why? Because after 6 months, that money is not going to be coming in. It's kind of like bonus money. When you move, you have some extra expenses that you might not really plan on, and you can use that money towards that. Now, it's a nice sum of money to begin with, but like I said, after 6 months, that'll be gone. So you don't really want to consider that in your budget. It's bonus money. Earning power, that's pretty self-explanatory. You got to think about what you have in assets, minus what your expenses, also including obviously what your pay hopefully will be. And you want to consider that you may not have a job for the first 4 to 6 months. That is something that you definitely want to keep in mind, and you want to make sure you're okay that you could get through at least 6 months if for some reason you don't have a job, waiting for you, or in the first, couple of months. Okay.
I can just add one quick thing.
Please, yes.
These are your first steps. I don't really know. We have more than 100 people here, which stage you're at and how far away you are from your Aliyah. When it comes to employment, one thing that you can do in advance is start looking at job boards, not because nobody's going to give you a job this far out, but it'll give you a sense of what is available in Israel that is similar to what you're doing now, because you may have to pivot a little bit, or you may find that it's worth working on a skill that will make you even more appealing to a specific job or a specific sector. So looking at the job boards, semi-regularly, it won't give you a job because you shouldn't apply for a job this far out, but it might give you an idea of what's out there. And therefore, if you're at least somewhere close to that, you might want to say, hey, I'm going to put more effort into getting the skills that I need for that job, or this is what's available. Now I have a better idea.
Excellent point. Thank you, Yit. Okay. So who's who? There's probably a lot of terms, a lot of places all mixed into one that you've heard through the grapevine. So just to give you a general idea, first of all, Nefesh B'Nefesh, that's us. And we are definitely here to help you in any way possible. But we're a nonprofit organization, and we are not the Jewish agency. We help you get everything together. We help assist you regarding communities, employment, education, and we help you with your documents in terms of reviewing them and making sure they're all in order. So because we don't approve the documents. That's really something for the Jewish agency. We want to make sure before you get to the Jewish agency, though, and you can't really go to them until you have all your documents in order. So that's our job, is to help you make sure you get them correctly. And there are a variety of documents you will need. I know Yitz is going to go into that further, so I'll let him do that. But under the Jewish agency, you have the Global Aliyah Center, which is the center you're going to contact after your documents are completed. And again, your advisor will help you with that. Your Aliyah Shaliach will be the person that you're going to meet with, and maybe by Zoom or in person, because you will have an interview. Again, it could be either in person or by Zoom. And then, of course, the Jewish Agency Professional Department, if there's some issues that need to be presented at a different level, those are the people that would be reviewing your file. The Israeli Consulate. Now, the Israeli Consulate serves two purposes, but for most people, the only interaction you'll have with the Israeli Consulate is to get your Aliyah visa. And that's like really when you're at the happiest moment, because you've really gotten everything else done, you've been approved. And so to go to the Israeli Consulate to get your visa or to send it through the mail, that's really that's who you're going to be using. Now, there are also, sometimes there's things as far as if you're already Israeli. I'm not going to go into the different statuses of people, but you might need to get your passport, Israeli passport renewed. You might need to get an Israeli passport, and that's where you would do that. But for most people, it's really just for the visa. So it's a very happy time. And then Mizrad HaKlita is the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration. You will meet with them once you are here. We don't need to go into detail of that, because that's something that once you get here, they're the ones who go over all your benefits and will help you get started in this country. So with all that, I'm going to turn this over now to Yitz, and I'm sure he's got a nice rest of the program for you, and I appreciate your time, and I'm still here. So hit it, Yitz.
So much, Lori. I'm going to applaud for everybody else, because I'm sure that they're applauding at home. Just a reminder, you can put questions into the Q&A, not into the chat. There's a thing Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in. Orly will be answering those in the back end. The process, what's your next step? The first step is fill out an Aliyah application. There's an application fee. You don't have to pay it. Just start with filling out the Aliyah application, even if you're planning on making Aliyah down the road. This at least gives us an opening. When you call, we see your file. Somebody will be able to continue following up with that. It costs nothing to start that application. So that's the first step. And I encourage you to do that sooner rather than later. Even if you're planning on making Aliyah in a year or whatever it is, you might as well start the application first. Once that happens, somebody from the engagement team will initially contact you, ask you a few questions, see where you're headed and how far out you are. When you get close enough, between 6 and 12 months out from your actual Aliyah date, you're going to be assigned an individual advisor, and they're going to help you from that time till you get on that plane with everything, all the planning and the documents that you're going to need. After you've gotten everything, as Lori mentioned, you're going to have an interview with the Jewish agency. They're the ones that give you the Aliyah approval. And then once you have your approval, you apply for your Aliyah visa and you book your Aliyah flight with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Now, there's a number of different statuses that you can be. Don't get too caught up with this. Your advisor can help you with this. This will just give you a little bit of a sense of the kind of people who are making Aliyah. A lot of these benefits are the same for at least the first three. Their process might be a little bit different. So an Aliyah Chadash means you never made Aliyah in the past. You have no Israeli background of your parents living in Israel, or you were born in Israel. And that's an Aliyah Chadash. An Ezrach Oleh is if one or both of your parents are Israeli, but you were born outside of Israel. An important note, especially just to look ahead of things that you can do now, even if you're planning on making Aliyah in the future, is that your parents have to register you that you were born abroad. If they did not, you would be called an unregistered Ezrach Oleh. It sometimes takes a little bit of time, so make sure that you're registered. So if you fall into this category of born outside of Israel to one or both parents who are Israeli, then speak to us, but you should be making sure that you get registered. A Katin Choser, I fall into that category. Born in Israel, my parents are Israeli, left Israel with at least one of the parents before age 14, and you've returned after the age of 18, then you would be a Katin Choser. There's two other categories that are people who are already Israeli and Israeli citizens, but let's say you're an Israeli citizen, you're married to one of the other statuses, so then you also get a free flight together with the rest of your family, called a Mishpachat Olim, assuming that they approve that. And a Toshav Choser, this is where you're totally Israeli, and so there's not that many benefits, but that's a status that you should be aware of as well. There are also some special cases that come up. If you were born in the former Soviet Union, depending on when you left, I won't get into the exact dates, but depending on when you left, you may have to go through something called Lishkat HaKesher. If that's the case, then it takes a little bit longer, the process. So I would speak to us and reach out to us as early as possible. Unregistered Ezrach Oleh, as already I mentioned, that's where you are registered. If you're a convert, you are eligible for Aliyah just like anyone else. There's just a few extra little steps in terms of the conversion documents. And Gorer Zchut means you've made Aliyah in the past, then you've come back, and now you're planning on coming back. So you've used some of your benefits, and therefore, when you come to make Aliyah, it might be a little bit different than somebody who's an Oleh Chadash. Okay, required documents. These are the main documents. Of course, depending on your situation, and your Aliyah advisor will speak to you and go through your story, so that way we can make sure that we know which documents you actually need. And the Jewish agency ultimately is the decider of all the documents, whether it's the right document, whether it's enough of the documents, etc. But these are the basic documents that you should be aware of. I will say one thing, in terms of documents, there are certain things that expire, and they need to be relatively recent, and certain things that don't. I'm going to talk about apostilles in the next slide, but apostilles do not ever expire, so therefore you can get working on them now, because in some places it takes a long time to get them. If you were born abroad in South Africa, it takes a really long time. If you're born in other places, you might need to get an apostille. Those are the kind of things that you can work on now. So if you're watching this and saying, I'm making Aliyah in 2 years, is there anything to do? Yes, work on your apostilles on your basic documents, birth certificate, marriage status certificates. I was actually just speaking to an Oleh who's not sure exactly when they're making Aliyah, but I spoke to him a few months ago, and I said to him, look, the one thing, he's single, one thing you can do is get your apostille. He got it already, and he said to me that it wasn't just that he got the apostille, so that means one thing out of the way, but it made him feel like he was more along in the process, that he's actually already starting the process. So it's also a psychological part to his Aliyah as well. So you need a birth certificate and an apostille. We're going to get to what happens for Canada. Proof of Judaism. This is a rabbi's letter. It doesn't say anything about your Judaism this is simply a bureaucratic aspect of it. And it has certain requirements. It has to be from a recognized synagogue, temple, shul. Doesn't matter the denomination. It has to be dated, ink signed. It has a certain way that it has to be written. Your Aliyah advisor will work with that. Passport, any passports that you have. Criminal background check. So this is the main thing that needs to be within 6 months. This is the one thing that really expires, so to speak. And therefore, you'll work with your Aliyah advisor about exactly when to do this. But you're going to need a background check from any country that you've lived in after the age of 14 for more than a year. Some people who are, have 5 background checks. Most people have 1 or 2, but that can happen as well. Any marriage status certificates. That means if you were married and widowed and divorced 3 times and et cetera, et cetera. So for each of those, you're going to need a marriage certificate and divorce certificate and a marriage certificate, divorce certificate with, again, the apostilles. Health declaration, entry exit form, and the waiver of confidentiality are all forms that you just fill out. They don't need an apostille, very simple to fill out. And the proof of living abroad, you have to just show that you've been abroad for the last 7 years. The easiest document for that is your passport, if it goes back that far. There are other documents which your advisor can help you with, which ones you need. Now, I mentioned apostille. This is one of the words that an Oleh will hear many times. So I'm just going to jump into what it is on one foot. For those of you who are familiar with what a notary does, he basically certifies that you sign something in front of him. He says you are who you say you are. And the apostille is similar. Basically, it's the government or the state where that document was issued and says that the signature on that is authentic. And once you do that, then any government that's part of the Hague Convention of Apostilles, Israel being one of those, will recognize that document. So the apostille comes from the state in which that document is from. So if you were married in New York, that's where your apostille is going to be from. If you were born in Nevada, that's where you're going to get an apostille for your birth certificate. Canada is not part of that treaty. And therefore, in most cases, you're going to get a authentication from the Israeli consulate in Canada. They're the only ones that can give authentication for that. In some very specific cases, you may also need an extra stamp from Ottawa, but in most cases, the Israeli consulate will give you the authentication on your documents from Canada.
Yitz, can I just say something about that?
Sure.
Okay, and on the Canadian one, it's something that you'll work with your shaliach at the Jewish agency, and they will help assist you with that. So although apostilles are a little bit more straightforward, the Canadian Jewish agency is very, very helpful in helping you obtain the chain of signature that you need, or the authentication, that you need for that.
Thanks, Laurie. And as I already mentioned, what do you need an apostille on? Your birth certificate, if you weren't born in Israel, if you're born in Israel, any Israeli documents do not need apostilles. Your criminal background checks. If it's from Canada, you need the RCMP background check. A lot of people sometimes get a local one. That's not what you need. And again, your authentication will come from the consulate. If it's from the FBI for the United States, then it comes from the federal. It's a federal apostille, and therefore it's going to come from the State Department or whatever country it's from. Any marriage, divorce, death certificates need apostilles. Any name change documents or any adoption papers, if those are relevant. Okay, Aliyah benefits. You shouldn't make Aliyah for these specific benefits. You should make Aliyah to make Aliyah, but it's always nice to get them. As Laurie mentioned earlier, in terms of the Sal Klita, that's one of the things that certainly is good to know that you have it, but don't build your budget around that. That being said, here are some of the benefits that you get. Each situation is a little bit different, depending on your status. Some things you may or may not get, depending on how many years you've been in Israel within the last few years. There's different factors, but this is a brief overview. And again, if you go on our website, you'll actually see a list of your benefits, and you click on each one, it'll tell you exactly how long each one is applicable, how long you have to take advantage of them. Some of them are good for 10 years. Some of them are only good for within the first 2 years. So each one has its own requirements and has its own timeline. And therefore you should check on our website for the specifics for each one. But these are the basics. You get a free flight, you get 2 pieces of luggage, besides for the one that you get free, so you get an extra 1 piece for a total of 2. Many people, when they're making Aliyah, are trying to figure out how to get everything there. They may even be thinking that they're going to send the shipment, but they still need a larger amount of stuff when they get there. And so you get your 2 pieces of luggage, and they'll pay for a 3rd piece of luggage. That's one way to get a little bit extra stuff there for not an expensive amount. You get a free taxi from the airport. The basic Israeli healthcare, as Aliyah mentioned before, there are different levels when it comes to healthcare, and therefore you get your basic, and then beyond that you would pay for it. But even that is very, very little. Most people that I know have some kind of additional healthcare because it's so inexpensive to upgrade your basic plan. Ulpan, you get a free Ulpan. There's also private Ulpans where you can get a voucher, but you get a free Ulpan. And tax breaks. So this, again, going back to what Lori said about speaking to an accountant, somebody who's qualified, you should definitely not ask me about finances and financial questions. Lori's better at that than I am. But there are definitely tax breaks, whether it's income tax, Arnona. Arnona is property tax, basically. So if you're renting an apartment, or if you own an apartment, you pay to the municipality. In Israel, generally, that means the renter is the one paying for that, not the owner. That gets passed on to you. If you're an Aliyah, then there's a benefit. If you, again, just to give you a sense of some things about time, within the first 2 years, you get to use it for 1 year of those first 2 years. And it's a very significant discount in some depending on the city that you're in. Some cities, it can be up to 90% discount on that Arnona. Passive international income. So this is one of those things that you want to speak to an accountant. As Lori mentioned, there are, we have sometimes there's a list that I share with people of accountants who know both US and Israel law. There are also webinars, especially for Canadians, because their tax is not the same thing. And usually it's based on residency. But there are also webinars on our YouTube channel, which you can find that specifically talk about also Canadian taxes. So if that's you, I was born here, but grew up in Canada. And so you should definitely take advantage of that. Customs benefits. This has to do with shipping things. When I was making Aliyah or returning to Israel, I thought everything was free. Turns out it's very expensive, but you get tax benefits. So you don't have to pay the customs. You still have to pay for the shipping. So the customs benefits you get is you don't have to pay for any of that. Tax benefit on a new car. Discuss with your advisor. I know that's a theme that you keep hearing. We're just trying to give you a little bit of a sense. In most cases, it's not worth bringing over a car. Just to give you a sense of what it takes to bring a car, it requires 5 different government agencies that you have to deal with. So if you thought bureaucracy was tough, you're gonna have to deal with 5 different agencies. For some people, it's worth it. They have a specific car, a van. There are a couple of other cars. They maybe have an attachment to your old, station wagon that you named Betty, or whatever it might be. But otherwise, in general, most people would say that it's better not to bring one. A lower mortgage rate. Sal Klita has been mentioned. You get money from the government for making Aliyah. It gets paid out over the first 6 months that you're here, basically. Different amounts based on your status, single, married, kids, etc. There's a rental subsidy that gets spread out over 5 years, and higher education subsidies. There's a limit, but you can basically get your next degree paid for, depending on your age and what you're studying. But you can get usually a degree paid for. Let's say you did your first degree and you want to get an MA, so then you can get that covered. It's based on public universities. So you go to a private university, it'll be the amount only that you would have gotten in a regular university. Some resources that will help you throughout. nbn.org.il is our website. As Lori mentioned, and it's a great tip, is if you're looking for anything related to Aliyah about any topic, type in Google NBN and then whatever topic you're looking at, education, finances, your status, whatever it is, benefits, and you will find a article that's written and also updated regularly. And so that's an excellent resource for a lot of things. We have our YouTube channel where we have webinars and different things up on our YouTube channel. There are a number of excellent Facebook groups. Here are just a couple. Living Financially Smarter in Israel. I'm part of that group and I've been here for 20 years. There's great tips. A lot of financial professionals are on that list and also give advice. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. It's Facebook, unless you're paying the person and they're responsible for it. But it has amazing resources about everything going on financially in Israel. Something that you can join already now. There's a Facebook group, Navigate the Israeli Healthcare System, which will also give you all kinds of things related to healthcare. Get Help Israel, Network, Get Help Israel. These are all just a couple of websites and Facebook groups, channels that can help you with your planning for your Aliyah. Network, Be Direct, that's a very Israeli kind of attitude, but a lot of it has to do with who you know. My father likes to call it vitamin P, which is protektia in Israel, which is like who you know. And that is a big deal. And the more you can do that, whether you go on LinkedIn and try to make connections there or speak to friends, that's a huge help in your Aliyah. And know your Aliyah rights and benefits will help you. When you get to them, we'll tell you about your rights and benefits. But know them well enough to know what will actually help you and things that you may not have thought of otherwise, which will certainly be a big help. So I want to just reiterate a couple of things that I said in the planning part, in the process part. One is the things that you can do now, no matter when you're making Aliyah, is anything that needs an apostille except for the background check, which has to be within 6 months. Your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, your divorce certificate, death certificate, whatever it is, especially certain countries. I mentioned South Africa because that's notoriously hard to get some of those documents. There are other countries as well that it takes a long time. Do those now. Even if you're making Aliyah in 2 years, they don't expire. So you should definitely work on that. Make sure you're getting the right thing. It might be worth to reach out to us to make sure you're getting it on the right thing and the right document. And B, start an application. You have nothing to lose. It'll be a good step for you to feel like you've already started your Aliyah process. This way you already get started and have a connection to us, and then eventually an advisor.
I'd like to say a couple things if I can.
Yes.
Okay. So two things. One, also going back to the documents, is to keep in mind the proof of Judaism letter, the rabbi's letter, is only good for 1 year. So if you are more than a year out, you just want to keep that in mind because you don't want to have to get that again. I know most people don't switch religions in between, but just in case they do require that for once a year. In regards to Ulpan, I tell all my people, it's never too soon, depending on your level, it's never too soon to get started on that. Although you can't get Ulpans paid for initially, while you're still in the States, you still can there's Duolingo, there's YouTube, there's listen to Israeli music a half hour a day. Anything you can do to get into the rhythm and the music of Israel will definitely help you down the line.
I'll tag team to that. I agree 100%. If there's one thing that you can do to prepare, certainly your language skills will help you, whether it's for a job or whether it's socially or whether you're getting around the system. There are a lot of things you can do, and Lori mentioned a few of them. I'll add a couple that I've suggested to people. You can put signs around your house, especially if you have kids. On the fridge it says mikarer. If you didn't know that word, you just learned a new Hebrew word. At least you walked away with something today. Mikarer means fridge, and you put a delet on the door, and whatever it is around the house, and it gets your kids get interested, and they know what's happening. But you also learn from that. And you mentioned YouTube. You can watch shows that you already know, and you can watch them in Hebrew, or watch them in Hebrew with the English subtitles, and you can hear more Hebrew. That's also another way to work on your Hebrew. But definitely, you're right. Hebrew is a big deal. The more you can come with, the better off you're going to be in your Aliyah. I see that there's.
I'm sorry. I was going to say there's one last thing. I also want to let you know that we will be sending this out to. This has been recorded, and we will be sending this out the seminar out to you if you signed up for this, which obviously you have because now you're here. And it will include the slideshow with it. so you can go over it at your own pace and at your own time as well. So I just want to let you know that.
Okay. Here's the general number. You can go on our website to start an application. I will say this. Lori mentioned before. I remember what the topic was about. Showing how healthcare is different than here, and budgeting and things like that. And a lot of times we tell people don't compare. Things. Well, there was this. It's different. But I would also say don't compare your experience to someone else's. You might find a friend who had a really hard time. They might have a really easy time. Everyone's is unique and everyone's situation is different. You need a lot of deep breaths. It's a bureaucracy. It doesn't matter where you're going. Anytime you're moving to a different country, it's going to be like that. And we're here to help you with that. So take a deep breath. It's very exciting. It's never too early to start, whether it's Hebrew, whether it's filling out an application, sending us questions, etc. We're looking forward to welcome you home very soon. I see a lot of questions that are still in the Q&A. So we'll give another minute or two for some of those to be answered. And if not all of them are answered, you can always reach out to us, look on our website for information as well. So don't think if you didn't get your specific question answered, this was really just as it is, first steps, right? So whatever you got answered, hopefully you took away from this something, even if it was just the word for fridge, which is okay. And if your questions are unanswered, so reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you. Okay. Hopefully there's enough time. I see a lot of questions popping up. So I'm just going to give another minute or two.
Yeah, we'll keep this open till 7:50, which is another 5 minutes, if that's okay. And this way you'll have a chance. And also, please remember that if you want to do the community webinar following this, I think Orly, I know, put that in the initial chat, to sign up for that. So you can go ahead and do that now so that you can get the link and be ready for that at 8 o'clock Israel time. And that's 12 o'clock Eastern time. No, it's not. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time. We all changed the clocks.
We're back to 7 hours. So hopefully you guys are all well rested. Well, while she's answering some of the questions that I see keep popping up, for those who already started the process and sometimes are a little frustrated by the process, I'm going to share a quick story. Maybe this speaks to you, maybe it doesn't. For some of my Olim, this was very good to hear. There's a story that I heard about the women of Chabad who were in Detroit for some event. They had a few days of programming, and it was Friday, and they were about to head back to New York. And lo and behold, their flight was canceled. There was a storm or something, and they were stuck in Detroit. So what do if you're from Chabad? You call the Rebbe. So they called up the Rebbe, or the assistant who answers the phone. When they explained the situation, they said, "We're stuck here in Detroit. What should we do?" So he says, "Let me ask the Rebbe." He comes back a few minutes later and he says, "Well, the Rebbe wants to know what does the word stuck mean?" So he started explaining, and he starts laughing and he goes, "The Rebbe speaks many languages. He knows what the word stuck means." His point was, you're never stuck. Like, this is where you are at this particular moment, but this is where you're supposed to be. And now you have to figure out, what am I supposed to do in the meantime? What am I supposed to do now? And they had to figure out what was the purpose of them being in Detroit at that moment. They had a wonderful Shabbat in the end. And ultimately, we're never really stuck. So if that helps you, I hope it did. If not, you just heard a nice story. Lori, you don't have stories to share? I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was kidding.
I have many stories. They call them Lori stories.
I agree. If you're lucky enough to have Lori as your advisor, you'll certainly hear many stories.
Oh, come on, Yetz.
I only have one. I just told it. That was it. I just told my one story. Yeah, that's it. You got the whole thing.
Well, okay. I think Orly is trying to finish up here. We can probably answer a couple of these. I am going to answer some of them out loud. They're talking about Canada does not do apostilles. No, they do not. It's authentication purposes. And you'll have to get a consular stamp, which the Jewish agency will be able to help you with in Canada.
Somebody asked about global affairs needed before the consular stamp. In general, not anymore. It's something that changed recently. So you shouldn't need it. You need to check with the consulate or with your shaliach/Aliyah advisor to make sure whether you need it or not. But in general, you shouldn't need the global affairs stamp anymore. You may have heard it from other people because it was needed in the past.
Okay, as we stated before, this has been recorded and we will be sending it out with the slideshow to all of you. So that is the question that's on here. I hope that it helps answer that.
Proof of religion is good for 1 year and criminal 6 months. That is correct. Rabbi's letter 1 year, background check 6 months. Okay, it is being recorded. Somebody asked, how long does it take to make Aliyah from Canada? There's no good answer to that. It really depends on your situation, what your documents are, how complicated it is. Start an application so you can have that initial conversation. Somebody asked where you get a background check. It depends where you're talking about. In Canada, it's from the RCMP, again, not local, and in the United States from the FBI. If you go on our website, NBN background checks, you'll see a bunch of companies that do it. And they can all, depending on where you live, which one is the closest for you, they take fingerprints usually digitally, and then they send it to the FBI.
The person that asked that you're a UK citizen living in the United States, yes, you are able to make Aliyah from the United States. You would need a background check from the UK if you live there after the age of 14. You will need a background check for the United States as well if you've lived there for more than a year. But that is something that, again, something to review with your Aliyah advisor. Okay, and with that, I think we're going to...
I'll answer one more. I see that Orly's trying to answer one.
Okay.
Oh, Orly's already answering about somebody. I'll mention it because it might be helpful for other people. In terms of health, you may, even if you have something chronic, that's not a reason for denial for Aliyah. They may ask you for more documentation and just to make sure that you're well enough to make the move. And similarly with healthcare in Israel, depending on the situation, but often a lot of people are used to hearing that you're denied because of some previous thing, and that's not usually the case in Israel, again, with some caveats. How do you get an Aliyah advisor? Start an application. Depending on how far out you are, you'll have at least somebody from the engagement team, and then they will eventually assign you a personal advisor. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So
Thanks.
yeah, we're gonna end it now. Like I said, if anyone has further questions, start an application, and we will be happy to help you, and your engagement team will be able to help you as well.
It's been our pleasure today. Oh, go ahead.
You take us out.
I was going to say, it's really been our pleasure. We definitely look forward to speaking with you when you're, like you said, within a year of making Aliyah. We'll be happy to help you in any way we can. That's what we're here for. And like you said before, we look forward to welcoming you home. Have a good evening, everybody.
All right.